Welcome to the next chapter in our series of Falling for Truth, which today will look at coincidence and the idea of betweenness, nature, and power. Chapter 8, The Gap Between. Can a man choose his future? If instead of throwing fits in a struggle to obtain, a man just relaxes and lets things happen, he will acquire more things in life. But letting things happen will only work for so long. We must have intricate scheduling and organization. Richard Rose. I am out on the deck of Anders' house, looking out at, well, there's not much to look at. Merely a standard small town yard, trees and fence. But it is a calm and peaceful setting. I'm sitting at the kitchen table. Anders, Liv, and I are finishing up our breakfast and our tea. I am entertaining thoughts about the stone circles we would soon be getting in a car to go visit. For some coincidental reason, Liv asks me if coincidental events have ever happened to me. All the time, I respond. I mean big stuff. All the time, I respond again. Can you give me an example? I recount the experience of a research trip to Mexico. On the second evening, Roberto, a friend of a friend in Canada, had taken me out to dinner in Mexico City. After dinner, he wanted to show me a real Mexican bar in the southern part of the city. It was more or less what I would expect from a bar back in Canada, except everyone spoke Spanish and most of the beers were Coronas. Then I happened to notice a group of about 7 girls off to my right. I gazed at a short, cute brunette. She looked at me, then walked right over and said in accented English, "You live in Toronto, right?" Stunned for a second, I replied, "Well, I used to. I just moved to Calgary last year. Why?" "I studied for a year in Toronto in 1996, and you look really familiar to me." After a short discussion, she revealed that she liked to spend time at Toronto's comedy clubs. "Right. The Laugh Resort," she snapped her fingers. "That's where I know you from. You're the comedian. You do impressions." Suddenly, I was even more stunned. What were the odds of such a meeting? To go to a far-off country, far away from any tourists, and meet someone who knew me from watching me at a comedy club years before. It was so strange. We spent the evening talking, and I told her more of why I was in Mexico, revealing that Teotihuacan was my next visit. She left briefly to phone her mother, who was a history teacher at a local high school. When she returned, I was told that her mother and father wanted to take me to Teotihuacan tomorrow, rather than my taking the bus as planned. So back to her house I went. There, her family looked after me for 3 days. They took me to the main sites around Mexico City before I headed eastward towards Palenque. I did my best at the time to thank Yuri and the Munoz family for all of their generosity. But I thanked them a second time by sharing this story. See what I mean, Liv? It was really odd. On that same 3-week trip to the Mexican Mayan sites, I had probably 4 more experiences as strange as that one. There is the word synchronicity. However, when you experience the effects of it, it's far more than just a term coined by Carl Jung. Carl Jung developed synchronicity? Asked Anders. Well, the name, anyway. Came about after a session with a patient, his office window, and the appearance of a scarab beetle while working with a patient, telling a dream about a piece of scarab jewelry. The experience got him thinking about an interconnected universe, far beyond the small way we tend to think of it. He came up with a term, and it stuck. Jung, of course, was more than just a brilliant founder of psychology. He was a true alchemist in his own right, experimenting on himself. Much of what he found about the mind and reality came part of his psychology books. Basically, synchronicity is a big word that means coincidence, occurrences that seem too strange, too set up to be random. Generally, most just ignore these happenings, finding a logical explanation for the oddity. Synchronicity points to a deeper connection to the fabric of the dream. The more one begins to realize that life on Earth is like a play or a movie, there comes a recognition that something beyond is always giving our character messages about what to do and where to go next. Stage directions is another way of expressing it. If the dream needs you to be someplace or meet someone pertinent to the movie called Life on Planet Earth, not only will it put you in that place, but if you can be still and shut up long enough, it will also tell you why. If we need to read a particular book, it falls off the shelf at the library. If we need to talk to someone, they keep showing up all over the place. One woman I knew, Candace, never had to call me long distance. She just had to think about me, and I called her the next day. The universe is the cosmic director, and we are its actors, and it wants the next scene shot without interference. But we all know about the ego of actors, and how they want the scene and script to be different and make themselves more important. The challenge is to be aware of the omens while they are happening. They are much easier to see after the fact, but that could be too late to do anything about them. It is still an in-the-dream thing, but what is behind the omen is outside of the cave. To notice the spirit, what Castaneda called the abstract, one must pay attention, for we never know when omens or signs will come. It's like a friend telling you they got a small part in a movie, but won't tell you where. To find them, you have to closely watch the whole movie. If you go to the bathroom, you might miss it. This connecting with the spirit requires our intent to be alert. The more awareness, the more coincidences we will catch, thus it will seem like there are more happening. This is not true, of course. The same amount is always occurring, we are just more aware of them. We must treat the awake world like the dream world to really catch them. Nothing is random. In the ancient past, synchronicity was the gods moving our lives around. It was obvious. The fact that it is no longer obvious, that books and studies must be done on the topic, should show how far humans have fallen. It is the one area where the idea of being in the now has value. After seeing an omen, one must be in no hurry for it to play out. We have to see them, and then have the trust in the spirit to just follow them and see where they lead, like Alice following the white rabbit. Synchronicity is not about acquiring material possessions or fulfilling personal desires. It will always guide you to what you need to do, not what you think you need. Eddie Traversa. While one is still asleep in the dream, they look for more and more coincidences to help them. Once awake, it's shown that all there is coincidence, and to see the patterns and flow with them. We may not like some things the universe has in store for us, but our number one preference should always be what the universe wants. You don't have to like it or understand it, but it is not happening randomly. It points out something deeper. Accidents and illnesses are the way the universe gets our attention. It fits some larger whole, like a hologram. Thus, the moment you begin to see what is really happening, you can start to make some good guesses as to what's coming. You also see certain things that would be impossible otherwise. If you were supposed to run a marathon tomorrow, and it was important for the universe that you do that, you couldn't get sick. It would be impossible because it wouldn't fit with the universe's wants. Once that gets grasped, your interaction with reality changes totally. Astrology, tarot cards, or the I Ching are helpful in the dream to tap you into a part of this wholeness and see a bit of the fabric more clearly. But they become less important when you see more of the totality for yourself. Thus, you have a sort of inner tarot or I Ching to call on. This does not mean that you will live happily ever after. There is no rule that says an awake person cannot be in pain or difficulty, or that they must always get what they want. However, everything that does happen will happen for a very clear reason. It comes to the extent that you become that which you have realized. Thus, you cannot think your way or practice into it. You become it. Not only is synchronicity amazing, but if you walk into it while it is occurring, it is the place where magic happens. It is this strangely diverse area where betweenness is found, a more optimal way that humans are supposed to function. Manifesting. I don't really have much of an understanding of all the vast areas that Rose presents with the term betweenness, but I do see it touches on the miracles and magic that people like shamans can perform. It also refers to our deep intuitive ability, access to other dimensions, and the ability to manifest both objects and situations into reality. This is not about making our egoic desires come true. Betweenness is something much greater. The idea of fulfilling our desires is what gets in the way of this unfolding. It is an unfolding which comes when we have walked into a state of surrender to the way things are, as opposed to the way our egoic structures want them to be. Yet being in this state of flow or surrender is not simply a complete acceptance of things in our mundane world. Instead, there is a special quality of guidance or an alignment that makes things happen as they are supposed to happen. You fear that if you let go, you will crash onto the sides of the bank, or everything will fall apart. But you will find that everything keeps moving as it should, even better than you expected if you were still trying to control it. Richard Rose. The real act of manifestation is not to be conjuring objects, but to be continually manifesting ourselves in each and every moment. The three of us are in a car. Anders is driving. Liv is in the passenger seat. We're still talking about coincidences and the like. Then Liv asks, "So you were really a comedian? Like for real?" I nod. "But you're not funny." "Maybe a lot of my audiences thought the same way." We all laugh. Actually, that's not true. My audiences found me very entertaining. That was a big part of my problem. Being funny for a comedian is a problem? Is that why you stopped? Oh, nice one. Partially, to be a comedian, your mind has to work a certain way. You have to see the world and find something wrong, stupid, painful. Then find a way to spin it around, to reveal it from the side, rather than head on. As I focused more on research and inner observation, a lot of that kind of mind had to be put aside. It's a good mind for being a comedian, but not digging into the self. You should have just followed The Secret. Liv was referring to the bestseller book from a number of years earlier. Oh, did it work for you? No, I never got anything I wanted. Well, there are noteworthy elements at the core in a book like The Secret. Such works mostly have as their foundation very egoic aims, though. They are based on self-importance and greed, continually promising you everything that your little heart desires. You're operating in consumer mode, and someone is telling you how to get more. Your greed helped fuel the greed of the people who wrote that book by $24. That very self-importance is what is getting in the way of intent, not helping it. Manifestation happens all the time, seemingly without any involvement on our part. The best way is to allow the universe to do its thing with as little input or demands as possible until we know for sure what we truly want. You're saying I don't know what I want? Probably not. You only think that you do. Or maybe you do know, but you're not following that pathway. That was the problem of my audiences really enjoying my comedy I was referring to. I really did not like to be a comedian on stage. I did like the crowd and the, I guess you could call it, drug high of a great show. But my only reason for doing it was to get myself a TV show. That was my authentic desire. Being a comedian was not. I figured doing one would lead to the other. It didn't. Because you just had to forget the comedy and do the TV stuff. Not so much. Comedy could have been the road, but then I had to be fully authentic in my comedy. Find the type that was right for me, and at the same time, would showcase why I was good for TV. But that's not how it turned out. I had suffered quite hard after my father had stolen all of my money, and comedy was basically paying for my food every week. So I started crafting material that would make my audiences laugh, get me more gigs, and more money. But that was never what I authentically wanted to perform, or which would have showcased me better to be on TV. You can get what you want? In one sense, yes. You can get what you want in the dream. However, the weird thing is that what you think you want is not really what you want. Thus, the opposite dynamic sets up a gigantic conflict. Instead, learn what the universe wants, then want that exclusively, and lo and behold, you will find that everything runs much smoother. When you cut yourself, you really need a Band-Aid, not $1 million or a snowmobile. If you were caught in a blizzard in the Northwest Territories, then maybe there would be a desire and need for a snowmobile. The difference between authentic and inauthentic desires, that is what needs to be grasped. With the ego in control, all one can think about is wanting bigger and better, houses, cars, or boobs. For every step we take during our awakening, many inauthentic needs simply won't survive with us. The authentic desires are not about getting more stuff or strengthening our image, but about becoming simpler and deeper. My want to be a comedian was a non-genuine desire, as opposed to having a TV show where I could really entertain. That was genuine. One was an egoic want for the roar of the crowd, the other was a natural want for something much deeper. While we were children, we all took very seriously all the tiny things that supposedly had huge effects on the world around us. We tried to keep illnesses away by jumping over cracks in the sidewalk. As we got older, we wanted to sit in a lucky chair, carry a charm, or not wear that red shirt on a date because it was bad luck. It's not really nonsense, for something inside is telling us that we have a way to tap into the universe. We simply don't know how to do it. We experiment with things that might give us an edge. Anything that seems to have worked in the past, our mind convinces us that we try again, just in case it is a factor which brings about the luck. However, any supposed edge that we find will only have limited results. That is because we're not totally clear or cognizant when it comes to all the factors. So, is this something we can control? Anders wonders. In one sense, we intend everything that happens in our reality, but it is tied to what we and others believe. If you don't believe something is possible, even at the subconscious level, then most likely it's not possible. That's why extreme cases of manifesting are so rare. Healers can stop bleeding, but not reattach a leg. It may have less to do with the healer's power, but rather the intent of the other person involved. The mountain must believe it can be moved, as the saying goes. A miracle is nothing more than overcoming a locked view of reality by both self and those who are around. The more possibility one perceives, the more intent flows. Consequently, the more likelihood inherent that something miraculous happens. For example, the New Testament claimed Christ performed miracles, but not in his hometown. His faith was no match for the lack of faith of those who he grew up with. To them, he was still the dumb carpenter's kid who threw the ball against the wall and kept them up all night. Faith limitations are the boxes people have, compartments which they put around everything. That to me is the shaman's main gift. A shaman opens someone's mind, or an entire group, up to the power of possibility. Part of the reason for the ritual they perform is to shift the mind from a state of doubt into one of possibility. Once that occurs, you could say that they step out of the way and allow the betweenness to work its magic. So betweenness is magic. It is an aspect of it, one with truly interactive quality. All of the current books and workshops about manifesting your desires and getting what you want are but a shadow. They present hardly a whiff of what someone who has stepped up the ladder beyond their mind can touch. The workshops are a how-to book for the asleep, which allow them to, occasionally, pretend that they are awake. But the asleep don't need to play pretend. What they need is to reach the awake state. This thing of betweenness is rather difficult to understand. It's even more difficult to write about or share. I was rather lost in it myself until an Australian friend, Eddie Traversa, explained betweenness in excellent detail. He told me that betweenness generally happens within our mind without us even noticing. But if you look for it, what you find is that it is an action, where a thought or wish occurs and has some reason in the moment. That thought stays only for a second in a gap or space in what we consider normal thought, but then is let go because there's no need for it to happen. It's very hard to explain in words, but the thought comes and holds a second and then seems to vanish to the wind. That is, until something occurs and then we remember, yes, I did think about that 2 days ago. For me, I have a betweenness when it comes to finding movies for some reason. I just think of a movie that I really want to see, coupled with having an honest desire for seeing it, then voila, the next day, there it is, for sale in some bargain bin, or is suddenly playing on late-night television. Why movies? I have no idea. But somehow the secret of betweenness is present there. The big element to it is the not wanting. The wish can come or go, and either result is fine. Any egoic attempt such as positive thinking, visualization, trying to create one's reality, are constrained to limited effectiveness, for they have the ego as part of the foundation of the action. Ego wants and needs what it is wanting. Thus, by default, it is in duality and will call forth its opposite, which will stop the process. You cannot describe up without also having a description of down. Betweenness begins to work when there are no concepts and no dual natures. It only blooms when a thought that is not a thought comes from a non-dual source and then is quickly forgotten. The greatest prayer you can say in your life is thank you. Meister Eckhart. Maybe a short discussion on prayer might help the topic. Prayer is an element of manifestation. If one can open up the hood of prayer, it is possible to get a good look at how its motor, so to speak, has been built. But you can't even change the windshield washer fluid in your car, Anders laughs. True. However, I can pray for help and be thankful when it arrives. Those are two keys, the opening for help and the thanks and gratitude before it even arrives, which is very little compared to the medicine people that I have met. They are prayer experts, and I am just a novice at best. Learn to know what the universe wants by learning to listening to what is inside yourself. The core ideal is the basis for what is truly prayer. Prayer is ultimate, selfless manifestation. The reality, however, is that prayer, as normally taught, is as if the people using it were weak children. Kids who need to ask some greater authority for blessings, the same as asking Dad for the keys to the car. We only get the keys if this higher power likes us. That is what people believe. As a result, they do all sorts of things and try to please the puppeteer, with the hope he will pull the strings for them in a way that makes them happier. Love and compassion are two powerful elements of human existence, when done selflessly. Yet much of what is presented as love is no more than people's way of bargaining with the puppeteer. Look how nice I've become, they say. So now you have to give me all the stuff I want and make sure that I'm always happy. It's another reason to examine how you pray, why you do it, what you think you will get from it, and how you believe it works when it does. Such examination can open up a great understanding for how the dream actually operates. Basic prayer, as described above, works, but only to a degree. That is because it is adding an emotional intent to something we focus on. Believe strongly enough that Jesus, Buddha, the Great Spirit, Krishna, Elvis, or even a stapler will help. Something will generally happen. We can believe that it was Jesus or Elvis that saved us. However, that object was just a focus point for our intent, something to aim the power of our emotions upon. There are amazing results that can be found from faith and prayer all over the world. The catch is this: why didn't it work all the time? If there were times when faith was equally strong, and yet there was no result. The problem has to do with how we understand the universe. Most prayer is specific. I want X, or make Y happen instead of Z. This means that prayer itself is limiting. We put a box around possibility, as only X is considered acceptable, or Y must be the event that takes place. Secondly, normal prayer is limiting by default because of the belief that the power being drawn is outside ourselves, being dispensed or granted by some supernatural being. Our petition can become a bartering with what we believe to be some outside force. By default, this sets up a dynamic where the element prayed for requires a supernatural other to dispense or grant it. I never really paid much attention to the idea of prayer until I began to spend time with my new native medicine friends. Almost every ceremony they performed had prayer as a main activity, and they told me the first thing I had to learn to be of service was to learn how to pray. It took some time to learn how different native prayer is. It's not about asking for something, please heal my sister. Rather, To pray their way was to say thank you. For example, thank you for the help you will bring to my sister. It is quite a twist. It's not putting a box around this, only asking for help. In fact, they are not even specifically asking for the sick sister to be healed, simply helped. Perhaps being well is helping, but perhaps it is not. Thus an entire spectrum of possibilities being tapped into utilizing this type of prayer. Second, they're not even really asking, but instead saying thank you, thereby acknowledging that what was asked for is already happening. There's no longer any doubt involved when it comes to the inevitable arrival of what was prayed on. One time I was out in the forest with my Ojibwe teacher, Dennis. I was leaving a tobacco offering by a tree for a friend of mine. After I left the offering, he reminded me, now that you've left the tobacco, never think of this wish again. This is done, and it is happening. Forget it. I was being taught the basic principles of betweenness without realizing how deep such a teaching truly was. Everything Eddie Traversa later told me in the course of an hour, Dennis had completely explained in 2 sentences. Richard Rowe said, "You can move mountains, but the mountains have to agree that they should be moved." By doing so, he is touching on something with a much bigger implication. In other words, how things happen, and just importantly, how they don't happen. We rarely take time to peek into what the objects want before attempting to impose any of our wants onto them. The same is true when it comes to the dream itself. Why should we think that my wishes for a tree, or a fish, or a backyard deck, or whatnot, should be greater than their own wants? What do they actually wish? Thus, it seems one key part of the manifestation side of betweenness is learning a trick. And that is the trick of getting in touch with whatever external element it is we wish to influence, and then see how it feels about it. If they agree with us, then the manifestation or change will be simple and almost instantaneous. If they are opposed, then we are in a struggle with it. Additionally, we will likely drain ourselves of energy by trying to move a mountain that has no interest in budging. As long as we think that we, i.e. an individual person or a group of people or even the whole planet, are in control of things, then we will be frustrated time and again. That is because there is a master plan when it comes to what is going on here. We want to see all the possibilities available in the dream, and then help move the dream specifically toward a particular one. You're not forcing an outcome, but helping to manifest a conclusion that is already there. Black magic is forcing the dream to the extremes when it comes to possibilities, solely for that person's own benefit. Thus, black magic can create some very rare prospects. However, it will also by default attract certain kinds of entities to help the black magic itself occur. The entities feed on the energy of those actions and demand a toll, more energy, for what they leveraged. These entities keep demanding rituals so that they can continue to keep feeding. In stark contrast, betweenness is about the power of the mind. It is magical, and it remains available to all the time, if one becomes interested enough merely to look. It can be started any place one is on the spiritual path. Only the more awake one becomes, i.e. the less egoic wants and fears clog up our basic functioning, the greater the simplicity when it comes to working with these elements. An advanced step on the path is when realize that they do not need an outside authority to focus their prayer on. The only object required is their own intent, for they see it was really the thing which was doing the manifesting all along. It's not about wishing for things to be better, but rather merging with the way that things are. The more this happens, the more one is in the flow, i.e. Morpheus walking effortlessly on the street. Shamans cultivate the interest to manifest only one thing, harmony or balance. They look for what is out of balance within the basic structure of the dream and then realign it. Thus, that is the same prescription whether what is out of balance is the self, a person, a village, or the earth. However, creating balance and harmony may not always be what you think it is. Many times, harmony can only come from conflict. Sometimes something must be torn down for another thing to be built. As a result, Merely saying that this harmony is bad and I have to fix everything is not seeing the full picture. Instead of buying $50 books that promise to make you rich, control other people, or alter the weather, instead, start by first examining how the dream works. Become a student of the dream world, what it is, and what it means to be in balance. Balance, though, also means being in the midpoint between everything, for in this gap is where the power lies. Understanding the force in the middle of two magnets, for instance, is tantamount to glimpsing the workings of the human mind working at high level of proficiency. This ability to use the middle of any two poles of duality is not just about how to generate experiences in the dream. It is also the way to take a step up the spiritual ladder. For in this midpoint, the gap, as Eddie Traversa called it, is where real power is found. That is the first half of Chapter 8. I will continue more with these ideas of the gap, magnets, energy, tension, and nature. Thank you for listening.